The houses in Pleasant Valley were all neatly lined up, each with a perfectly manicured lawn and a two-car garage. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and gossip traveled faster than the speed of light. I, Alex, was a bit of an anomaly. I worked from home as a freelance web developer, which meant I spent most of my days staring at a screen, surrounded by empty coffee cups and the occasional cat. I wasn't exactly a social butterfly, but I always made an effort to be friendly with my neighbors. I helped Mrs. Henderson carry her groceries, offered to jumpstart Mr. Johnson's car, and even baked cookies for the annual block party. I prided myself on being tech-savvy. I could fix any computer problem, build a website from scratch, and even explain blockchain to my grandma, though she still didn't quite get it. My Wi-Fi network was my lifeline, connecting me to the world and allowing me to earn a living. I had a strong password, a secure router, and all the latest security updates. I took my online privacy seriously. Life in Pleasant Valley was usually quiet and predictable. The biggest excitement was when the ice cream truck came around, or when someone's dog escaped and ran through the neighborhood. But all that changed when Karen moved in. Karen was the newly elected president of the Homeowners Association, or HOA. She was a woman of a certain age, with a sharp bob haircut, a permanent scowl, and an unwavering belief in her own authority. From day one, she made it clear that she was in charge and that everyone else should follow her rules. She sent out endless emails about lawn maintenance, garbage disposal, and parking regulations. She even started a neighborhood watch program, complete with reflective vests and walkie-talkies. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she just wanted to make the neighborhood a better place. But it soon became clear that Karen was more interested in control than community. She nitpicked every little thing, issued fines for minor infractions, and generally made everyone's lives miserable. The other neighbors and I would exchange weary glances and shake our heads whenever she passed by. We knew that sooner or later, she would come for us too. I just didn't expect it to be about my Wi-Fi password. Karen wasn't just the HOA president, she was a force of nature. Her official title might as well have been Chief Worrier of Pleasant Valley. She seemed to thrive on finding things to complain about. One week it was the height of the grass, apparently, 9 inches was unacceptable, it had to be exactly 3, the next it was the color of someone's mailbox, apparently, beige was too bland. She had a way of making you feel like you were personally responsible for all the world's problems. Even her smile felt like a veiled threat. I'd heard whispers from the other neighbors about her past transgressions. Old Mrs. Gable claimed that Karen had once sent her a letter threatening legal action because her petunias were too purple. Mr. Henderson said she tried to get him fined for having a slightly crooked Christmas wreath. The stories were endless. It wasn't just the rules themselves, it was the way she enforced them. She seemed to relish the power, the ability to dictate how everyone else lived their lives. It was like she was living in a constant state of righteous indignation, convinced that she was the only one who knew what was best for Pleasant Valley. And she was always watching. You could practically feel her eyes on you as you mowed your lawn or took out the trash. It was like living under constant surveillance. I often joked with my friend Sarah that we should install security cameras just to document all of Karen's antics. I'd had a few minor run-ins with her myself. Once, she'd left a passive-aggressive note on my door about my recycling bin being left out for too long, it had been, like, an hour. Another time, she'd cornered me at the mailbox to lecture me about the importance of using organic fertilizer. I'd politely nodded and smiled, trying to avoid any confrontation. I knew that engaging with her would only make things worse. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before she escalated things. I could feel it in my bones. And I was right. It all started with a seemingly innocuous request, a simple question that would eventually lead to a neighborhood-wide Wi-Fi war. I just wasn't prepared for how absurd and infuriating it would become. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was deep in the throes of debugging some particularly nasty code. My apartment was a disaster zone of empty energy drink cans and crumpled takeout containers. The cats, Pixel and Bite, were engaged in a fierce battle over a sunbeam on the living room rug. The doorbell rang, and I groaned. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole and saw Karen standing on my porch, arms crossed, a stern look on her face. I sighed. Here we go. I opened the door, trying to muster my most polite smile. Hi, Karen. What can I do for you? Alex, she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. I need your Wi-Fi password. I blinked. Excuse me? Your Wi-Fi password, she repeated, as if I were hard of hearing. I need it. I was completely taken aback. Why? I asked, genuinely confused. Karen's expression tightened. It's for HOA business, she said vaguely. We need to access some documents. HOA business? I repeated, my eyebrows raised. What documents would the HOA need to access through my personal Wi-Fi network? She shifted uncomfortably. That's not really your concern, she said. Just give me the password. I hesitated. This was getting weirder by the second. I'm sorry, Karen, but I'm not comfortable giving out my Wi-Fi password. It's a personal network, and I have sensitive information stored on it. But it's for the HOA, she insisted, her voice rising slightly. It's important. I understand, I said calmly, but I still can't give you my password. If the HOA needs to access documents online, they can use their own internet connection. I offered a solution. There are plenty of free Wi-Fi hotspots around town. Or, the HOA could even invest in their own dedicated internet service. It would be much more secure than using someone's personal network. Karen's face was turning red. Are you refusing to cooperate with the HOA? She demanded. No, I'm just protecting my own privacy and security, I said. I'm happy to help in other ways, but I can't give out my Wi-Fi password. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. So very wrong. Karen wasn't used to being told no. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how to get her way. She straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and launched into a new tactic. Alex, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, I really need that password. We're trying to modernize the HOA. We want to create a website where residents can access important information, pay their dues online, and submit maintenance requests. I raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a great idea, Karen. But again, I don't see why you need my Wi-Fi password for that. You can set up a separate internet connection for the HOA office. But that would cost money, she exclaimed, throwing her hands up in the air. And we're trying to be fiscally responsible. Using your Wi-Fi would be much more efficient. Efficient for whom? I thought to myself. Look, I said, trying to remain calm, I understand you're trying to save money, but I'm not comfortable compromising my security for the sake of the HOA's budget. It's not fair to me. Karen's eyes narrowed. Are you saying the HOA's needs aren't important? She challenged. No, I'm not saying that, I retorted. I'm saying that my privacy and security are also important. And I don't think it's unreasonable for me to protect them. She huffed and puffed for a moment, then changed her tone again. This time, she went for the guilt trip. Think of the community, Alex, she said, her voice laced with dramatic concern. Think of all the residents who would benefit from having a modern, user-friendly HOA website. Are you really going to deny them that just because you're being difficult? I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. This was ridiculous. Karen, I'm not denying anyone anything. I'm simply saying that I'm not comfortable sharing my Wi-Fi password. There are other ways to achieve your goals without compromising my security. I was starting to get frustrated. I had work to do, and Karen was wasting my time with her unreasonable demands. I decided to try one last time to reason with her. Look, Karen, I said, I'm happy to help the HOA in other ways. I can even offer my expertise in web development to help you create the website. But I'm not giving you my Wi-Fi password. End of discussion. I hoped that would be enough to get her to leave. But I knew, deep down, that Karen wasn't the type to give up easily. She was like a dog with a bone, and my Wi-Fi password was the bone she was determined to chew on. The stage was set for a full-blown Wi-Fi war, and I was right in the middle of it. Karen wasn't one to take end of discussion as, well, the end of a discussion. She crossed her arms again, her face hardening. The false sweetness was gone, replaced by a steely glare. "All right, Alex," she said, her voice low and menacing. "If you're not going to cooperate, then I'm afraid I'll have to take this matter to the HOA board." "The HOA board?" I repeated, incredulous. "Seriously? You're going to bring this to the entire HOA board?" "Yes," she said firmly. "This is a matter of community importance. Your refusal to share your Wi-Fi password is hindering the HOA's ability to serve the residents of Pleasant Valley." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was actually trying to make me out to be the bad guy, the one who was preventing the HOA from fulfilling its mission. It was absurd. "Karen, with all due respect," I said, "I think you're blowing this way out of proportion. It's a Wi-Fi password. It's not a matter of life and death." "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped. "This is about principle. It's about following the rules and cooperating with the HOA." "What rules?" I asked. "Show me the rule that says I have to share my Wi-Fi password with the HOA. I guarantee you, there isn't one." Karen's face flushed. She didn't like being challenged, especially when she knew she was on shaky ground. "Well," she stammered, it's implied. As a resident of Pleasant Valley, you have a responsibility to support the HOA and its initiatives." "That's not how it works, Karen," I said, shaking my head. "I support the HOA by paying my dues and following the rules. But I'm not obligated to give up my personal privacy and security just because you ask me to." I decided to try a different approach. Maybe if I offered to help in a different way, she would back down. "Look, Karen," I said, "I'm happy to let you use my personal hotspot on my phone if you really need to access something quickly. I have plenty of data. It will be much slower, but it will give you internet access without me giving you the password." She considered this for a moment, but her eyes still had the fire of a cornered badger. "No," she said finally. "That's not good enough. I need access to your Wi-Fi." I sighed. It was clear that she wasn't going to budge. This wasn't about logic or reason, it was about power and control. And Karen wasn't about to let go of either one. "Fine, Karen," I said, my voice resigned. "Do whatever you have to do. Take it to the HOA board. I'm not changing my mind." With a final glare, Karen turned and stomped off my porch. I watched her go, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. What had started as a simple request had escalated into a full-blown power struggle. And I had a feeling that this was only the beginning. The Wi-Fi war was officially on. The next few days were tense. I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for Karen to strike. I found a notice on my door stating I was in violation of Section 4.2 Paragraph B of the HOA bylaws, failure to comply with reasonable requests from the HOA board. There was a vague threat of fines and further action if I didn't rectify the situation immediately. I decided to do some research. I dug out my copy of the HOA bylaws, a thick, intimidating document filled with legalese and bureaucratic jargon. I spent hours poring over it, searching for anything that could possibly justify Karen's demand. As I suspected, there was absolutely nothing about Wi-Fi passwords. There were rules about lawn maintenance, exterior paint colors, and the types of permissible holiday decorations, but nothing about internet access. However, I did find a section about community cooperation that was vaguely worded and open to interpretation. It stated that residents were expected to cooperate in good faith with the HOA board to promote the well-being of the community. Karen could potentially twist that to argue that I was violating the bylaws by refusing to share my Wi-Fi password. I also decided to do some digging into Karen's past HOA dealings. I reached out to a few of my neighbors, discreetly asking about their experiences with her. The stories I heard were even worse than I had imagined. Mrs. Gable, the one with the 2 purple petunias, told me that Karen had been trying to get her evicted for months, claiming that her garden was a public nuisance. Mr. Henderson, the one with the crooked Christmas wreath, said that Karen had been harassing him about his unsightly garbage cans. I even heard a rumor that Karen had tried to get the HOA to ban children from playing in the common areas. Apparently, she found their laughter disruptive. The more I learned about Karen, the more I realized that this wasn't just about a Wi-Fi password. It was about power, control, and Karen's insatiable need to dominate everyone around her. I knew I couldn't back down. If I gave in to her demands, it would set a dangerous precedent. She would think she could get away with anything, and the other residents would be even more afraid to stand up to her. I decided to prepare for battle. I contacted a lawyer, just to get some advice on my rights and options. I also started documenting every interaction I had with Karen, in case I needed to use it as evidence later on. I knew that this Wi-Fi war was going to be a long and difficult one. But I was determined to fight for my privacy, my security, and my right to live in peace in Pleasant Valley. And I had a feeling that the other residents were starting to rally behind me. They were tired of Karen's tyranny, and they were ready to fight back. The Wi-Fi password was just the spark that ignited the rebellion. The lawyer I spoke with, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Evans, confirmed my suspicions. There's absolutely no legal basis for her demand, she said. You have a right to protect your personal property and privacy. She can't force you to share your Wi-Fi password. She advised me to send Karen a formal letter, stating my refusal to comply with her request and outlining my reasons for doing so. She also suggested that I attend the next HOA meeting, prepared to defend my position. I drafted the letter, carefully wording it to be polite but firm. I explained my security concerns, cited the lack of any relevant HOA rules, and offered to help the HOA in other ways. I even included a link to a reputable cybersecurity website, explaining the risks of sharing Wi-Fi passwords. I printed the letter, signed it, and sent it to Karen via certified mail, just to make sure she received it. Then, I started preparing for the HOA meeting. I knew that Karen would try to rally the other residents against me, so I decided to do some outreach of my own. I talked to my neighbors, explaining the situation and asking for their support. To my surprise, many of them were already on my side. They were tired of Karen's bullying tactics, and they saw this as an opportunity to finally stand up to her. Mrs. Henderson even offered to bake cookies for the meeting, to help create a more positive atmosphere. Mr. Johnson said he would bring his guitar and play some calming music before the meeting started. It was clear that the tide was turning against Karen. But I knew that Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. She was a master of manipulation, and she would do everything in her power to get her way. I had to be prepared for anything. That evening, while I was brainstorming with my friend Sarah over video chat, she suddenly said, "You know what you should do? You should rename your Wi-Fi network." I looked at her blankly. Rename my Wi-Fi network? What good would that do? Sarah grinned. Just trust me, she said. Rename it something memorable. Something that will really get under Karen's skin. I thought about it for a moment. It was a crazy idea, but it had potential. It would be a harmless, yet effective, way to express my frustration and make a statement. But what to rename it? That was the question. Sarah and I spent the next hour brainstorming Wi-Fi network names. We tossed around dozens of ideas, some funny, some clever, some downright insulting. How about Karen S. Kryptonite? Sarah suggested, giggling. Too obvious, I said. She'd just ignore it. Okay, what about, get your own Wi-Fi, Karen? Better, I admitted, but still a little too on the nose. HO_headache? Maybe, I said, but I want something that's both funny and makes a point. We kept going back and forth, throwing out ideas and rejecting them. I wanted something that would capture the absurdity of the situation, Karen's overbearing personality, and my refusal to be bullied. Then, suddenly, Sarah exclaimed, I've got it. What about? NotForKaren911. I burst out laughing. It was perfect. It was a play on the not for public use warning that you sometimes see on private networks, combined with the emergency number, implying that Karen's demands were a crisis of epic proportions. That's brilliant, Sarah. I said. That's absolutely perfect. We both laughed for a few minutes, imagining Karen's reaction when she saw the new Wi-Fi network name. I could practically see her face turning red with rage. But then, a wave of nervousness washed over me. Was this going too far? Was I escalating the conflict unnecessarily? Are you sure this is a good idea, Sarah? I asked. I don't want to make things worse. Sarah shrugged. I don't know, Alex, she said. But honestly, how much worse can things get? She's already threatened to take you to the HOA board over a Wi-Fi password. I think it's time to fight back, and this is a pretty harmless way to do it. I thought about it for a moment. Sarah had a point. Karen was already treating me like I was public enemy number one. What did I have to lose? Besides, the idea of Karen seeing that Wi-Fi network name every time she tried to connect to the internet was just too tempting to resist. Okay, I said, a grin spreading across my face. Let's do it. NotForKaren911 foot it is. I logged into my router settings, changed the Wi-Fi network name, and saved the changes. As the router rebooted, I felt a surge of excitement and anticipation. The Wi-Fi war had just entered a new, and much more entertaining, phase. I just hoped I wouldn't regret it. But, deep down, I knew I wouldn't. This was exactly the kind of petty rebellion I needed. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of anticipation. I knew it was only a matter of time before Karen discovered my little Wi-Fi prank. I even brewed an extra-large pot of coffee, just in case I needed to be alert for a confrontation. I spent the morning working, trying to focus on my code and ignore the nagging feeling that I was about to unleash a hurricane of Karen-induced fury. Pixel and Byte seemed to sense my anxiety, constantly rubbing against my legs and purring loudly. Around lunchtime, I heard a loud knock on my door. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. I opened the door, and there she was. Karen, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. Her eyes were narrowed, her lips were pursed, and her hands were clenched into fists. She looked like she was about to explode. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, her voice shaking with anger. I played dumb. The meaning of what, Karen? I asked, trying to maintain a calm and innocent demeanor. She pointed her finger accusingly at my apartment. Your Wi-Fi network. It's an insult. I feigned confusion. My Wi-Fi network? What are you talking about? Don't play coy with me, Alex, she shouted. I know you changed the name of your Wi-Fi network to NotForKaren911. It's a direct attack on me. I shrugged. I have no idea what you're talking about, I said, trying to suppress a smile. Maybe you're seeing things. Karen's face turned an even deeper shade of red. I am not seeing things, she screamed. I saw it on my phone. It's right there, mocking me. Well, I don't know what to tell you, Karen, I said, still pretending to be clueless. Maybe someone hacked my Wi-Fi network and changed the name. You know, cybercrime is a serious problem these days. Karen was clearly not buying it. You did this, Alex, she insisted. You did this to humiliate me. Why would I do that, Karen? I asked innocently. I'm just a simple web developer, trying to make a living. I don't have time for petty games. She was practically sputtering with rage. This is not a game, Alex, she shouted. This is a violation of the HOA bylaws. It's cyberbullying. I raised an eyebrow. Cyberbullying? Seriously, Karen? I think you're taking this a little too seriously. I demand that you change it back, immediately, she ordered, pointing her finger at me again. I sighed dramatically. Oh, all right, Karen, I said, pretending to give in. If it's really bothering you that much, I'll change it back. But I had no intention of changing it back. Not yet, anyway. I wanted to savor this moment, to see Karen squirm and fume over my little act of defiance. The Wi-Fi war was far from over, and I was just getting started. The next HOA meeting was going to be a real show. Fine, Karen huffed, but I'm warning you, Alex. This isn't over. I'm going to bring this up at the HOA meeting, and everyone will see what kind of person you really are. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed away, muttering something about disrespectful millennials under her breath. I closed the door, leaned against it, and burst out laughing. Pixel and Byte, startled by my sudden outburst, jumped off the couch and stared at me with wide eyes. Don't worry, guys, I said, still chuckling. It's just Karen being Karen. I spent the rest of the day preparing for the HOA meeting. I reviewed the HOA bylaws, gathered my evidence of Karen's past abuses of power, and practiced my arguments in front of the mirror. I wanted to be ready for anything she threw at me. As the day of the meeting approached, I started to get nervous. I knew that Karen would try to paint me as a villain, a troublemaker who was disrupting the peace and harmony of Pleasant Valley. I worried that she would succeed in turning the other residents against me. But then I remembered the support I had received from my neighbors. Mrs. Henderson's cookies, Mr. Johnson's guitar music, the knowing nods and supportive smiles I had received from everyone I had spoken to. I realized that I wasn't alone in this fight. The other residents were just as tired of Karen's tyranny as I was. The night of the HOA meeting arrived. I dressed in my best, professional but approachable, attire, grabbed my notes, and headed to the community center. When I arrived, the room was already packed. I saw Mrs. Henderson setting out her cookies on a table, and Mr. Johnson tuning his guitar in a corner. I also saw Karen, sitting at the head of the table, glaring at me with undisguised animosity. As I took my seat, I noticed that several of my neighbors were giving me encouraging smiles. I took a deep breath and prepared for battle. The meeting started with the usual formalities: approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, financial reports, and updates on community projects. But I knew that the real fireworks were about to begin. Finally, Karen stood up and cleared her throat. Before we move on to new business, she said, her voice dripping with indignation, I would like to address a serious issue that has come to my attention. She paused for dramatic effect, then turned to face me directly. It has come to my attention that one of our residents, Mr. Alex Thompson, has engaged in a deliberate act of disrespect and cyberbullying towards me, the president of this HOA. The room fell silent. All eyes were on me. The Wi-Fi war had officially gone public. I stood up, took a deep breath, and faced the room. With all due respect, Karen, I said, my voice calm and steady, I believe you're blowing this situation completely out of proportion. I paused, letting my words sink in. Yes, I did change the name of my Wi-Fi network to NotForKaren911, I admitted. And I did it for a reason. I looked directly at Karen, my eyes locked on hers. I did it as a form of protest, I explained. A protest against your unreasonable demands, your constant micromanaging, and your abuse of power as president of the HOA. A murmur went through the room. I could see some of the residents nodding in agreement. Karen demanded that I give her my Wi-Fi password, claiming it was for HOA business, I continued. But she couldn't provide a valid reason for needing it. She just wanted access to my personal network, without any regard for my privacy or security. I gestured to the stack of documents I had brought with me. I researched the HOA bylaws, and there is absolutely nothing that compels me to share my Wi-Fi password. In fact, there is nothing that even mentions Wi-Fi passwords. I then turned to address the other residents. I understand that the HOA has a responsibility to maintain the community and enforce the rules, I said. But that doesn't give Karen the right to bully and harass residents into complying with her every whim. I paused again, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. I changed the name of my Wi-Fi network as a way of saying, enough is enough, I explained. I'm not going to be intimidated by Karen's threats or manipulated by her guilt trips. I'm going to stand up for my rights, and I encourage all of you to do the same. As I finished speaking, a round of applause erupted from the audience. Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Johnson were clapping enthusiastically, and several other residents were giving me thumbs up. Karen, on the other hand, was fuming. Her face was red, her eyes were blazing, and she looked like she was about to have a stroke. "This is outrageous," she shrieked. "You're all being manipulated by this anarchist. He's trying to undermine the authority of the HOA." But her words were drowned out by the applause. The tide had clearly turned against her. The residents of Pleasant Valley were finally ready to stand up to Karen's tyranny, and the Wi-Fi war was about to reach its climax. The silence after the applause was deafening, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. The applause died down, but the tension in the room remained thick. Karen, still red-faced and sputtering, tried to regain control of the meeting. I demand a vote," she stammered. "A vote to censure Mr. Thompson for his disrespectful behavior and to force him to change his Wi-Fi network name back to its original setting." She looked around the room, expecting to see a sea of supportive faces. But instead, she was met with a mixture of hesitant glances and outright disapproval. "I don't think that's necessary, Karen," Mrs. Henderson spoke up, her voice surprisingly firm. "Alex has a right to express his opinion, and I don't see anything wrong with what he did. It was just a harmless joke." "Harmless?" Karen shrieked. "It's cyberbullying. It's a violation of the HOA bylaws." "I disagree," Mr. Johnson said, strumming a gentle chord on his guitar. "I think it was a creative way to stand up to your overzealous enforcement of the rules, Karen." A few other residents chimed in, expressing similar sentiments. They were tired of Karen's constant nitpicking and her attempts to control every aspect of their lives. They saw Alex's Wi-Fi name change as a symbol of their own frustration. Karen realized that she was losing control of the situation. She tried to argue, to plead, to threaten, but no one was listening to her anymore. The residents of Pleasant Valley had finally found their voice, and they were using it to speak out against her tyranny. "This is ridiculous," Karen exclaimed, throwing her hands up in the air. "You're all being completely unreasonable. I'm the president of this HOA, and I deserve to be treated with respect." "Respect is earned, Karen," Mrs. Gable said, her voice surprisingly strong. "Not demanded." The room erupted in another round of applause, even louder than the first. Karen, defeated and humiliated, slumped back in her chair, her face buried in her hands. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. After months of being bullied and harassed by Karen, I had finally stood up to her, and I had won. The Wi-Fi war was far from over, but I had definitely scored a major victory. But I also knew that Karen wouldn't give up easily. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she would undoubtedly try to retaliate in some way. I had to be prepared for whatever she threw at me. Just then, a quiet voice spoke up from the back of the room. It was Mr. Peterson, a mild-mannered elderly man who rarely spoke at HOA meetings. "Excuse me, Karen," he said, "but I think I may have found something that could be relevant to this discussion." He held up a copy of the HOA bylaws, his hands trembling slightly. "I was just rereading this document," he said, "and I noticed something that might be helpful." He was about to drop a bomb. "What is it, Mr. Peterson?" Karen asked, her voice laced with thinly veiled annoyance. She clearly wanted to move on from this embarrassing episode and get back to running the meeting her way. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. Well, he said, I was looking at Section 7. 3, Paragraph C. It states that, the HOA shall not infringe upon the reasonable expectation of privacy of its residents. Karen scoffed. What does that have to do with anything? That's about window treatments or something. I don't think so, Karen, Mr. Peterson said, his voice growing stronger. I think it's much broader than that. I think it means that the HOA can't force residents to do things that would compromise their personal privacy, like sharing their Wi-Fi passwords. A gasp went through the room. Everyone was realizing the implications of what Mr. Peterson had just said. That's ridiculous. Karen sputtered. That's not what that section means at all. I disagree, Karen, Mr. Peterson said, his voice unwavering. I think it's a very clear statement about the importance of privacy. And I think it supports Alex's right to protect his Wi-Fi network. Several other residents started nodding in agreement. They had always suspected that Karen was overstepping her boundaries, but they had never had the courage to speak out against her. Now, with Mr. Peterson's discovery, they felt emboldened to challenge her authority. I think Mr. Peterson has a point, Karen, Mrs. Gable said, her voice trembling slightly. You've been pushing us around for too long. It's time for you to start respecting our privacy. Yeah, Karen, Mr. Henderson added. We're tired of your constant nitpicking and your ridiculous rules. We just want to live our lives in peace. The room was filled with a chorus of agreement. The residents of Pleasant Valley had finally reached their breaking point. They were tired of Karen's tyranny, and they were ready to fight back. Karen, realizing that she had completely lost control of the situation, slumped back in her chair, her face a picture of defeat. She had tried to bully and intimidate the residents of Pleasant Valley, but she had failed. And in the process, she had destroyed her own credibility and authority. The Wi-Fi war was finally coming to an end, and Karen was the clear loser. The revolution had begun. Mr. Peterson's discovery was a game-changer. The reasonable expectation of privacy clause, while seemingly innocuous, provided a solid legal basis for my refusal to share my Wi-Fi password. It was the loophole that Karen had overlooked, the silver bullet that would finally put an end to her reign of terror. Realizing the impact of Mr. Peterson's find, I felt a surge of relief and gratitude. The Wi-Fi war had taken an unexpected turn, and it looked like I was finally going to win. The other residents, emboldened by Mr. Peterson's discovery and Karen's obvious defeat, began to voice their own grievances. Mrs. Gable complained about the constant harassment she had endured over her two purple petunias. Mr. Henderson recounted the time Karen had threatened to fine him for having a slightly crooked Christmas wreath. One by one, the residents of Pleasant Valley shared their stories of Karen's petty tyranny, revealing a pattern of abuse and overreach that had gone on for far too long. As the stories piled up, Karen's face grew increasingly pale. She realized that she had not only lost the Wi-Fi war but also the respect and trust of the entire community. Her reign of terror was over. Finally, Mrs. Henderson stood up and addressed the room. I think it's time for a change, she said, her voice clear and strong. I think it's time for us to elect a new president of the HOA. Someone who will listen to our concerns, respect our privacy, and treat us with fairness and compassion. A chorus of agreement swept through the room. The residents of Pleasant Valley were ready for a new leader, someone who would represent their interests and not just their own. Karen, realizing that her time was up, stood up and stormed out of the community center, slamming the door behind her. The residents of Pleasant Valley watched her go, feeling a mixture of relief and satisfaction. With Karen gone, the meeting quickly turned to the business of electing a new president. Mrs. Henderson was nominated, and she accepted with grace and humility. A vote was taken, and she was elected unanimously. The Wi-Fi war had come to an end, and Pleasant Valley was finally free from Karen's tyranny. The revolution was complete. A new era had begun, one of peace, harmony, and respect for the reasonable expectation of privacy. It was so very sweet. Karen's attempt to use the HOA as a weapon against me had backfired spectacularly. What she had intended as a public shaming had turned into a full-blown rebellion against her own authority. She had sought to humiliate me, but instead, she had humiliated herself. Her credibility was shattered, her reputation was ruined, and her power was gone. She had lost the Wi-Fi war, and she had lost the respect of the entire community. It was a complete and utter defeat. As I watched her storm out of the community center, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for her. She had clearly become consumed by her own power, and she had lost sight of what was truly important, treating people with fairness, respect, and compassion. But I also knew that she had brought this on herself. She had chosen to abuse her power, to bully and harass the residents of Pleasant Valley, and to ignore their concerns. She had reaped what she had sown. The next few days were filled with a sense of relief and celebration. The residents of Pleasant Valley were overjoyed to be free from Karen's tyranny, and they were eager to embrace a new era of peace and harmony. Mrs. Henderson, the new HOA president, quickly set about undoing Karen's damage. She repealed the most oppressive rules, apologized to the residents who had been unfairly targeted, and promised to listen to their concerns and treat them with respect. She even organized a neighborhood barbecue, to celebrate the end of the Wi-Fi war and the beginning of a new chapter in Pleasant Valley's history. As for me, I kept my Wi-Fi network name as NotForKaren911, at least for a little while. It was a reminder of the battle I had fought and won, a symbol of my defiance against tyranny and my commitment to protecting my privacy. But eventually, I changed it back to something more neutral. The Wi-Fi war was over, and it was time to move on. It was time to focus on building a better community, one where everyone felt safe, respected, and valued. The HOA board even hired me to build a website for them to help bring them into the 21st century. Karen would not have approved. With Karen out of the picture, Pleasant Valley experienced a period of unprecedented peace and tranquility. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the neighborhood for so long lifted, replaced by a sense of camaraderie and cooperation. Mrs. Henderson proved to be an excellent HOA president, listening to the concerns of the residents and working to create a more inclusive and welcoming community. She organized regular town hall meetings, encouraged open communication, and made sure that everyone felt heard and valued. The oppressive rules and regulations that Karen had imposed were gradually repealed, replaced by more reasonable and flexible guidelines. The residents of Pleasant Valley were finally able to relax and enjoy their lives, without fear of being fined or harassed for minor infractions. Even the issue of the Wi-Fi password was resolved amicably. The HOA board, recognizing the importance of internet access in the modern world, decided to invest in a dedicated Wi-Fi network for the community center. Residents could use the network for free, accessing important information and connecting with their neighbors. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Pleasant Valley transformed from a place of fear and oppression into a vibrant and thriving community. The residents worked together to improve the neighborhood, organizing cleanup days, planting trees, and building a new playground for the children. The Wi-Fi war had come to an end, and Pleasant Valley had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. The experience had taught the residents the importance of standing up for their rights, of speaking out against injustice, and of working together to create a better world. As for Karen, she seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. No one saw her anymore. It was as if she had simply vanished, leaving behind only a faint memory of her reign of terror. Some say she moved away, but others believed she was still hiding somewhere in the neighborhood, watching from the shadows. But whatever her fate, one thing was certain: Karen's attempt to control Pleasant Valley had failed. And in her failure, she had unwittingly sparked a revolution that had transformed the community for the better. The moral of the story? Don't mess with people's Wi-Fi. Or, just don't be a bully. I also heard from my lawyer that Karen was trying to claim she never actually asked for my password and that I was harassing her. Luckily, I was prepared. I had kept every email, every note, and a recording of our final conversation. It was glorious. Looking back on the whole Wi-Fi war, I realized that it was about more than just a password. It was about standing up to bullies, protecting personal boundaries, and fighting for what's right, even when it seems impossible. It taught me the importance of community, of speaking out against injustice, and of never underestimating the power of a well-placed Wi-Fi network name. I learned that even the most seemingly harmless act of defiance can have a profound impact, inspiring others to stand up for themselves and create positive change. I also learned that it's always a good idea to keep detailed records of everything, just in case you need to defend yourself against a vengeful HOA president. The experience also made me appreciate the importance of technology and the role it plays in our lives. In a world that's increasingly connected, it's more important than ever to protect our privacy and security. And sometimes, that means standing up to those who would try to take it away from us. A few weeks after the neighborhood barbecue, I started noticing some strange things. New Wi-Fi networks were popping up all over Pleasant Valley, with names like Karen Free Zone, Privacy Matters, and My Wi-Fi Not Yours. It seemed that my little act of defiance had inspired others to express their own feelings about Karen and the importance of protecting personal boundaries. My favorite was the one that simply read, "Be kind." I even heard a rumor that Sarah, my friend who had suggested the NotForKaren911 name in the first place, had changed her own Wi-Fi network name to Still Not for Karen. I chuckled to myself, imagining Karen's reaction if she ever happened to be in range of Sarah's Wi-Fi. But the best part of the whole experience was the sense of community that had emerged from the ashes of the Wi-Fi war. The residents of Pleasant Valley had learned to stand together, to support each other, and to fight for what they believed in. And that, I realized, was more valuable than any Wi-Fi password. As I sat in my apartment, surrounded by empty coffee cups and purring cats, I couldn't help but smile. The Wi-Fi war was over, and Pleasant Valley had finally found peace. And it all started with a simple request for a password. Who knew that something so small could have such a big impact? It made for a great story, at any rate. And hopefully, it will inspire others to stand up for themselves, too. The end.